Thank you very much for this exposition in exceptional clarity. You did a much better job than I could have done myself summarizing it. And in particular, adding this migration is a very topical. And actually that is the main purpose of this new center that YASA and the Joint Research Center of the European Commission together now launched for at least 5 years, where we want to actually marry the two concepts in the way you've done it, and also have sort of additional sources of heterogeneity, not just the education, but also the labor force participation, but then the country of birth, and maybe some ethnicity variables, because that's of course what people are concerned about, the heterogeneity. Not every person in a society is considered to be equal. There are some clear divisions. Now, having said this, this is what we demographers can do. It's sort of the supply side of people. And I think there we can do better than just pure number. We can give the supply side, including the quality dimension, as you clearly said. But I increasingly think that we should also worry about the demand side, like how many jobs there are, how many people are needed by the economy. And sometimes it really was sort of almost strange going to, let's say, Spanish meetings where there was a huge youth unemployment and at the same time the politicians demanding more children. Somehow there was the notion that this unemployment is only a temporary thing that's going to go away. But recently we hear well-founded views by economists that maybe that's going to be our future. We have this rapid increase in technology, automation, robotics doing the jobs. How should we demographers deal with this? So I think our first task is still to do better on the supply side of people, but I guess at some point we need to really link more with the economic communities who estimate the demand for people in the future. But thanks again for this wonderful.
Do you have any more questions or comments?
Thank you, Thomas, for the very stimulating presentation. I wanted actually to commend Wolfgang for the paper that he wrote, and I read it last year, in fact. Over the last 4 years, there has been concern of below replacement fertility in Iran, and some people, some politicians or some of those who didn't know much about fertility made politicians worried that the Iranian population will decline very soon. And taking into account one of the UN population projections, they said by 2100 the Iranian population will decline to half by 30 million. What we did, we started to look at fertility, below replacement fertility, and looking at our own children estimates. We said fertility has not gone down, it's 1.8, and it's in fact, when you look at cohort fertility, it's close to 2. But the most interesting thing that I discovered after reading your paper, I noted the issue that you raised that optimal fertility could be even below replacement fertility. Last year we wrote a letter, it was basically a confidential letter to the supreme leader in Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and I mentioned your name and the paper that you wrote that it may not be needed to reach replacement fertility, and it may not be possible to reach fertility, and even if fertility is maintained at below replacement fertility, that could be optimal, and your evidence was very nicely and timely read at that time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas. Very interesting indeed. Are you considering in future work the link between migration and fertility? Because the immigrant streams to a lot of countries come with a potential for having larger families than the native. So would that be useful to include that factor in your analysis?
Yes, of course that would be a very useful consideration, but I think that would be more a consideration for the other concepts of population replacement with migration, especially when you look at how many births are born in the country, because here you purely account for both migrations, in-migration, out-migration and births, and look at how the cohort has replaced itself with a timeline of, say, 30 years to allow for migration at young ages. But what we also see in Europe, in many places, that migrants are both very diverse, but this diversity is producing increasingly a convergence between migrant and native fertility on average. So of course we have groups of migrants with super high fertility still, but in most European countries there is a gradual convergence, and we have a couple of countries like the Netherlands or Denmark, for instance, where nowadays migrant fertility rates on average are the same, more or less, as the fertility rates of the native women. So that's also something which should inform our thinking about where migrant fertility can go in the next decade or two.